Could the loss of the Giants be the loss that ultimately sinks Mike Shanahan?
It could be a reference game, but he still has a chance to. Right now, I believe he keeps his job. What will happen in the next 4 games, I think, will determine if you're able to bring him back. There's a possibility that Mike Shanahan and this staff can lose in a manner where you just can't justify bringing him back. I do believe 4 games left, that's enough for him to have epic losses, not just lose games, but if he loses in a way where it seems as though there's just something that's just not there, it may be a reference point. But I won't say that this is the game. As of right now, I would assume that it's safe to think that he's going to have his job next year.
Mike, what's your take on the Giants' loss specifically? Obviously, a lot bigger picture, too.
Well, Mike Shanahan's got 2 things working for him right now. 21 of his players are free agents. And as LeVar knows, a lot of these guys, the next 4 games might not mean anything to the fans in terms of playoff positioning, which they're out of it. But they need to get jobs next year. Josh Morgan has 3 years left on his deal. He's probably not coming back to this team. My assumption is he's not going to. Josh Morgan's got to find a job. He's got to, so there's some players on this team that actually have to perform and do something. Why would Josh Morgan
not have a job next year?
Well, there is a. I'm not saying he won't have a job.
What I'm saying here at this
because they have a deal in which they can walk away from his deal and not pay him a cent after this year because he's been paid up front.
But answer the question: why get rid of Josh Morgan after this season?
Because you will have extreme numbers and millions of dollars that you didn't have before, and you can go out and get a receiver that's not what I think is a number 3 receiver on a team.
You know what's interesting? What's interesting? The reason why I asked that question.
You like that I answered it?
Well, it kind of plays into what it didn't play completely into it. I thought you would go strictly into he hasn't produced.
Well,
a guy loses his job, and that's the common sense answer, right?
You're right.
Is that he did not produce. I honestly believe that, again, I've been ringing this bell. This is my epiphany as to why this team continues to suffer. We'll talk about free agents. We'll talk about bringing guys here, and can we bring them here based off of a 1-year contract with a coach? Well, the problem is you have a culture where guys are being rewarded before they produce anything. Starting with the GM, moving down to the coach. Then there's players. Will they give Arakpo a bigger contract? Does he deserve a bigger contract? Did D'Angelo Hall deserve the contract that he received when he came here? Did Albert Hainsworth deserve the contract that he received when he came here? You have did Robert Griffin III deserve the attention that he received when he came here?
I know exactly where you're going, and it's a great point.
There's an equation here. I have finally come to the conclusion that the reason why the Redskins organization fails is that there is a fundamental fracture in the locker room based off of who's rewarded and who isn't. That's first and foremost. Starts in the locker room. So I'm looking at this guy over here. He makes millions and millions of dollars. I make minimum wage. I'm a Redskin guy. He's a free agent. He's a draft pick. I've been here. I've done nothing. This guy gets all the attention, all these different things, right?
They don't compensate people who carry water for the organization.
A guy like Lorenzo Alexander, a guy like Antonio
Cartwright.
These guys come and go, and they're not valued. That's in the locker room. But then you have coaches. Name me one coach. The coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I believe, makes $3.9 million, I believe, which is nothing to sneeze at. But when you compare 3.9 to 7, there is no comparison. This man came here, and these coaches, you had defensive coordinators. I believe Greg Williams made more money. And Greg Williams produced, but I believe Greg Williams as a defensive coordinator made more than most head coaches in the National Football League. Guys are being rewarded. I've now come to the place where you hold Dan Snyder accountable for that, but in a way, he is trying to build a winner based off of paying for the best employees that he can pay. And I think it's horribly backfiring.
Keep an extra minute. I want your take on that, Mike, on that. To some degree, I think that is how a lot of the NFL works. You have to pay people up front before, to attract talent to some degree. Granted, there are the outliers.
You have to be able to build your talent. You have to be able to have guys who are hungry as a coach and reward a staff to build a
blue
team.
collar types.
But look at New England.
That's fair.
There was a moment though when go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, I was going to say that it was more. LeVar's right. There's a moment when Clinton Portis got up to the microphone after he was compensated, and one of the first things he said was, "Hey, all my friends come here. This is where you can get paid."
Right.
And so if that mentality is out there, that this is where you can get rich. You make your bones somewhere else, but you get rich here.
But is that still the case now?
It has to be.
I think it's dangerous. I think it's a dangerous culture because
the culture's changing, though. You got to give Shanahan some credit.
How do you figure the culture's changing?
He chased out Hainsworth, guys like that. Those prices. It's changing. I'm not saying it's completely gone.
I'm totally mind-boggled by so many people who says the culture of this team has changed. How? You chased out one player that was a cancer to this team. Okay, John, but that's great. But where has the culture of this team changed? It's still a losing culture.
Right, beyond RG3, who's overpaid right now?
Here's the problem. You have guys. I don't.
Wait. Did you say beyond RG3 who's overpaid?
RG3's not overpaid. What they gave up
right.
for him. I'm saying what they gave up for him in that regard.
I'm saying this in terms of payment versus production. All right. It's not about looking at the locker room and saying, okay, our cap is good because of the contracts that we have in place. I'm saying who is valued versus who isn't valued and where that money is going. So even if a player isn't overpaid
every guy in the offensive line, maybe except Trent Williams, is overpaid if they're making $1.
Right.
It's a joke.
Right, let's move
that
on.
Offensive line is a joke right now.
It's difficult to move on from saying that a culture has been changed, Forsyth. You cannot say that the culture of this team has changed because you are still
the winning culture. Certainly, the losing culture hasn't changed. I'll give you that. The same results. At the end of the day, wins and losses, and if that's the case, then you would think Shanahan would be under a lot of pressure. I'd be surprised if that's the case he comes back.